I hope everybody has been enjoying this incredible feast. Is it not an amazing feast? Let's give another round of applause. So at each coming up dinner, we raise a glass for a toast. And the purpose of the toast is to show gratitude for what we have been given and to honor each other and the fellowship that we enjoy. But of course, there is something very special about the class of 2018 of Rhodes Scholars. So I've been actually lobbied already over the course of dinner to add a special class of 2018 toast to the official toasts to follow. So I'm going to begin with the class of 2018 toast, which is, I've been informed of the fact that we have a member of the Rhodes Scholar class of 2018 who had a truly traumatic experience a year ago where she had to interview for the scholarship on her birthday. And then she has had a much less traumatic experience of enjoying the coming up dinner on her birthday. To Samantha, Sammy Mack. Happy birthday. And many more. And now I would like to ask you all to please rise and join me. So first, let us raise our glasses and affirm Cecil Rhodes's favorite words from Aristotle, inscribed on the rotunda of Rhodes House, and as appropriate today as they were 2,000 years ago, to activity of soul, to excellence of character, and to the highest good for humankind. Second, let us give thanks to our benefactors and especially our second century founders, John McCall McBain, who is here with us this evening, and the Atlantic Philanthropies, for their extraordinary generosity that allows us to forge a second century of fellowship. To our second century founders. As most of us are guests in this beautiful land, let us thank Britain and its queen for having us on her shores. You're here. And finally, we toast you, the scholars, and everything that you bring to our community. To the scholars. You may be seated. And now, okay, everyone. Thank you. I'm missing the gavel part. Oh, there we go. Okay. Now, it is, and I mean this from the heart, it's my immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Peter Stamos, who is one of our newest trustees, who will be our coming up dinner speaker. He is a scholar from California and Worcester, class of 1981. He came to Oxford to read for a DPhil in politics and healthcare economics. And since then, he has demonstrated one of my favorite qualities about Rhodes Scholars, your curiosity about the world and the ability to contribute across different social sectors, from public service to consulting to higher education to business to sports. He has been a management consultant at Booz Allen and Hamilton and McKinsey & Company. He has also served as Chief of Staff and Chief Economist to the United States Senator Bill Bradley, and was responsible for developing the senator's economic and health policies. He also taught economics at both Stanford University and at Harvard. Currently, he serves as the chair of the Investment Advisory Board for Major League Baseball, for all the baseball fans out there. And he was previously the founding chairman of the Investment Committee for the Board of Stanford University Hospitals and Clinics. His main day job is he is the CEO and Chief Investment Officer at a very successful firm, Stamos Capital Partners. Now, as that short bio reveals, Peter's interests are wide-ranging, from economics and healthcare to baseball to politics to investment structures. But what his bio doesn't capture, and what you will experience this evening, is his incredible warmth. Peter loves his family and his kids. He loves giving back to Rhodes Scholars and to many, many other wonderful, wonderful causes. And if you ever get the chance, and it is a great gift, to visit Stamos Capital Partners, a very impressive office in Silicon Valley, you will find that his entire company, this is something, tells you something about leadership, his entire company, every member of that staff reflects his warm, kind, and generous personality. We are so honored to have him on our board, and as the new chair of our Finance and Investment Committee, and truly delighted to have him speak at your coming up dinner. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Peter Stamos.
That is the kind of introduction that my wife and children and my father would be proud to hear, and my mother would believe. Thank you, especially about kindness and warmth. I'm going to talk about some Greek philosophy. So the one word that I'll leave you with for the entire evening is agape. Agape, which is God's love. And today I'm going to talk to you about three kinds of love. Learning to love, working with love, and then loving to learn. And we'll start with loving to learn, but before I do, I want to take a step back and go back to last night, because this is your coming up dinner, and it was last night a coming down dinner for three amazing people. Margaret McMillan, great historian. My dear friend Mike McCaffrey, leader in business and finance, and John McBain, our second century founder. Karen Stevenson, Karen, where are you? Karen spoke on behalf of Don Gogel, and she quoted Thucydides and Herodotus. In talking about the three of them, I have to quote Pericles. If Athens shall appear great to you, consider that her greatness was won by the valor of valiant men and women. These are valiant men and women. Margaret O'Brien, stepping down as great historian, and with her I'll use the metaphor of loving to learn. With Michael and John, we'll talk about your professional life and how you can be a leader in business and a leader in philanthropy, and for that we'll talk about working with love and learning to love and give back. So I'm going to change my speech. I had some prepared remarks, but I was sitting next to my provost from Worcester College, and across the way from Sean, who's a California Worcester scholar, and from Madeline, from Stanford, and is a Rhodes Scholar. And when your provost says something to you, which she said to me, so throw away the script and just tell some stories. That's what you do. So three themes, three stories, and I'll start with putting this in some context. I have the notes here, by the way, in case I forget what to say. So the first is you've been given a great award. And I didn't fully understand what that award was when I first arrived here, because when I first arrived here, I showed up very happy to have a Rhodes Scholarship, and I went to Barclays Bank. Mike, you remember checking into Barclays, and you had to show proof of scholarship, and they said, what kind of scholarship do you have? I said, I have a Rhodes Scholarship, and the clerk looked up and said, I'm sorry, what's that? some 20 years later, when I was in what some might call still a young man, I was on a flight. I'm an economist, and I was sitting next to a gentleman who I thought I knew from a picture, and he introduced himself. He said, "Hello, my name is Myron Scholes." And I said, "The Myron Scholes?" He says, "Well, yes, since I was born, Myron Scholes." I said, "My name is Peter Stamos, and Myron Scholes, Black-Scholes theorem." You know, go on Google. 10 formulas that shape the world right after force is equal to mass times acceleration, E equals mc squared. Right around number 6 is Black-Scholes theorem. So we're having conversation, and in the conversation, it comes up, "So where did you go to school?" I went to Stanford, and then I went to Oxford. He said, "Oxford, really? Were you a Rhodes Scholar?" I said, "Yes." He says, "You know, young man," it was nice, Mike, back then he still called me a young man, "that's quite an honor." And I looked at him, I said, "Well, Dr. Scholes, with all due respect, I don't have a Nobel Prize, and I don't have a theorem named after me." And then he said something that if there's one message I can give to you for the entire evening, forget everything else, just is this. Don't lose your mind. The message was, talk about dramatic effect. Okay. He said, no, Peter, you don't understand. The Nobel Prize was something I received for work I did 30 years ago. The Rhodes Scholarship, which you received, is for the work that you're going to do throughout your life. So my message is, this is not the end, this is the beginning. This is not the end, this is the beginning. All right, so it's 3 stories, 3 themes. Let's see if we can get this thing going. And there will be stories about people that I love and care about, and one's a Rhodes Scholar and one's not. It doesn't matter, but they all have had a positive impact on my life, much in the same way that Michael and Margaret and John have had massive impact on many people's lives. So the first is Sandy Tatum. So Sandy Tatum was a Rhodes Scholar. He led the California Rhodes committees for 25 years. And he was the founder of Cooley, Godward, Huddleston, Castro, and Tatum, one of the most powerful law firms in the world. He was the head of the U.S. Golf Association. He was U.S. Amateur Champion, NCAA Golf Champion at Stanford. The last one until another young man came about 40 years later by the name of Tiger Woods. He was an impressive individual. And when he gave us the scholarship, he looked at us, Mike, and he said, "Second only to my wife and children, the Rhodes Scholarship is the most meaningful thing that's ever happened to me in my life. So for God's sake, do something good with it." Now, fortunately for me, scared, I didn't know what that meant. So I called my dear friend Andrew Banks, and I said, "Andy," I said, "what does he mean by carry on the world's fight and to do something good and it's meaningful?" And Andrew looked at me and he said, spoke to me on the phone. He said, "I'll tell you, there's 3 things that are going to happen in your life, Peter, and by the way, that's the topic for tonight. You're going to go to Oxford, and you're going to learn. And after you finish learning, you're going to earn. And after you finish earning, you're going to return. That's what you do, Peter." Thank you, Andrew. That's my message. That's my speech. Andrew Banks. So part 1 is learn. Now, my 2 kids, if they were here, I would say the same thing to them that I'm saying to you. The most important thing when you're a child is to love learning, right? And the peak of your learning begins right about preschool and ends right around kindergarten, because at this incredibly unstructured time. Then you go through school, and they start adding structure to your life and hours and hours of homework. And you fill out your activities list, you get your high test scores, and you structure life, and then you get into a great university, and if you get through the interview process, you get a Rhodes Scholarship, and then you're here. And the then you're here part is a little scary. And my story is Andrew Banks again. So I arrive, come to Oxford, and I'm studying economics and finance and quantitative economics, and I walk up into my room at Worcester College, into my dorm room, and on my desk, there's a book, The Complete Works of William Shakespeare. And there's a note, and in the note it says, "Dear Peter, this book is for you. You're at Oxford now. I understand you're studying economics, but I would really like you to read some poetry and some literature, and I'd like you to go to a lot of plays while you're here. Enclosed is 50 pounds. Love, Andrew." True story. Read poetry. I then met with my supervisor, Lord Asa Briggs, Sir Jonathan's predecessor twice before. Walked into the meeting ready to sort of see what I'm supposed to do, and Lord Briggs brought out a stack of books. And he said, "Here, Peter, read these books, and come back and see me in a couple of weeks. If you'd like, you could write an essay. If not, just show up and we'll talk about the books." Now, by the way, just one piece of instruction. I don't want to know what those books say or what those authors think. I want to know what you think and what you feel. Are you clear on the instructions? Okay, fine. That was my first tutorial. So, having been at Harvard Law School and having worked hard at writing essays, I figured I'll take this one off. No essay. Showed up unprepared. I thought the Socratic method at Harvard Law School was tough. I've never had a tutorial like that. Never again did I show up without an essay prepared for Asa Briggs. But the tutorials were not about showing him what I knew in economics. They were about showing him what I had learned and my desire to keep learning outside of our tutorial. So we went through a long process of this, and at the end of many years and a stint at teaching for a while and coming back finally to submit my DPhil, I finally met with him again in your kind office. And anybody here ever sat for a viva? It's a scary thing, right? So you're getting prepared for your oral exam, you finish your thesis, and as you're getting ready for it, you're sort of memorizing everything, because that's what we've been trained to do, memorize. And I met with Lord Briggs, and I said, "Lord Briggs, what should I do for my viva? What should I do to prepare?" And then he virtually quoted Andrew Banks, and he said, "Peter, what you should do is go to a beach and read a lot of poetry." Love to learn. Welcome to kindergarten. Do you remember when you were in kindergarten, you got to think freely? You get to do that here. You get to study hard. You can be a scholar. You can be an historian like Margaret Macmillan. You can also take that scholarship with you for the rest of your life. It's a lifelong learning process. Reestablish that joy you had of learning when you were in preschool. So that I'm saying to Spencer and Shanae. They're at 10 and 12. I'm saying it to you. Second theme. If you can, find your violin concerto. Now, this is a story that is personal. It's my father. My father was a concert violinist. He ended up becoming Frank Sinatra's lead violinist. And when I was a young man, I asked him, before coming to Oxford, what should I study? What should I read? And he said to me, "Look, Peter, in life, everybody has a violin concerto they're supposed to play." I was lucky. Mine just happened to be one, and I figured it out when I was 12. So my advice to you is find your violin concerto, play it, and you'll always be happy. Now, what he neglected to say, it takes about 2,000 hours a year for 10 years and practice before you get to play, but it was a really nice metaphor. And with that metaphor, I came to the understanding, and this is the Oxford transition that you make in 2 or 3 years, that you actually have the privilege of finding something that you can work really hard at and that you can work with love. The poet, philosopher Khalil Gibran says that love and work are coterminous. Again, agape. That work is love made visible. And when you work with love, your energy is overflowing. So you find something, you practice forward. So here's the other story. Second story is Dad tells me this advice. By the way, I passed it on to my best friend. His name is Ron Johnson. And Ron Johnson and I were, this after Oxford, I'm teaching undergraduate economics and finishing law school. And after a run one day, Ron turns to me and says, "So what are you doing next year, Peter?" I said, "Well, I'm doing what all good law students do. I'm going to go work for Cravath or Covington, a law firm." And he looks at me and he goes, "Peter, you're teaching economics. You're here living at the business school. Don't you remember your dad's advice?" He says, "You're not a lawyer." By the way, there are great lawyers out there. It's a wonderful field. One of my Worcester advisees, a young woman by the name of Elena Kagan, she did pretty well in the law. So I'm all good with that. But it turns out Elena loved the law, and he was right. I loved economics. He said, "You should go work for this place called McKinsey." I said, "What's McKinsey?" I had no idea. He said, "Just trust me, go there." So I go to McKinsey, and who's there giving the keynote address? But Don Gogel. Remember Don, Thucydides? Don Gogel was there, recruiting from Harvard Law School and recruiting me to join McKinsey. Again, being advised by my dear friend Andrew, for how an economist can join McKinsey. As fate would have it, that had a huge impact on my life, and Don and I set up a program to recruit Rhodes Marshall Scholars for McKinsey, and one of those folks was Susan Rice, another one was Dominic Barton, and they went on to do some pretty amazing things in life. So I turned to my friend Ron. I said, Ron, thanks for the advice. What are you going to do? Now, he was at Harvard Business School, and he said, well, I'm not going to go to McKinsey, I'm not going to Goldman Sachs, I'm going to go to this little place called Dayton Hudson, and they got a group called Mervyn's. Anybody hear what Mervyn's is? Mervyn's is a department store. And I said, Ron, what are you going to do at Mervyn's? He said, well, I got a great job. My first job is they're going to teach me to scrape gum off the basement floor, and then they're going to show me how to use a cash register. And I looked at him and I said, Ron, let me get this straight. Harvard Business School, Baker Scholar, scraping gum off the floor, learning how to use a cash register, that's a job you get out of high school. What are you talking about? He said, Peter, 2 words for you, violin concerto. Mine is retail. I want to change the face of retail in this country, and the only way I can do that, he said, I've got to get it from the basement up. So I tell people, if you go to Target, it's now Target. There is no gum on the floor. That was Ron's first effort. If you go to the Apple stores, this was his second effort, there's no cash register. Ron's passion was to transform retail, and he did that with Steve Jobs. And the message here is find what you love, work hard, and then practice, 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 and never give up. Now, remember where you are. You're not in that stage now. You're still in the love to learn stage. You still get, so I've asked you, what do you want to do? I'm fortunate enough to sit next to the California and Worcester scholar, Sean, and next to a Stanford scholar, Margaret, and Madeline, and to hear their stories and ask them what they want to do. And my first statement is what Andrew told me. You don't need to know now. You get to take these 2 or 3 years and you get to learn and love learning, and then you make that transition. And then you move forward, and once you work really hard and you have your accomplishments, whichever they may be, you move into the third and most important stage. And for this one, I share my best example, and for those of you who've met her, it's my wife. I learned everything I know about how to love and how to do philanthropy by experiencing her life side by side with me. So Sun-Mi is not a Rhodes Scholar, but she was born in Korea and came here when she was 15 years old. She didn't speak a word of English. Her family, who were abjectly poor by every standard that you can imagine, took their life savings, gave it to her, wrapped it in duct tape with little notes that, my name is Sun-Mi Cha, please deliver me to the Emma Willard School. Somehow, magically, 3 years later, she was accepted to Georgetown College, and a year after that, when she was 19, she was accepted to medical school, and about a decade later, I met her. And when I found this story out, I looked at her and I said, oh my God, Sun-Mi, how did you do that? If they'd taken me and dropped me off in Korea and put me there, I'd be selling newspapers on a street corner. And she looked at me and said, yeah, you would be. She says, but not because of who you are, Peter. It's because America is the only place that allows a poor girl from Korea to go to medical school. Now, that was the America then. It's unfortunately not the America now. But that poor girl from Korea who became a physician taught me a lesson in life that resulted in the most significant investment decision I've ever made. And this is my third and last message to you. If you have the privilege of following Andrew's great guidance, which is to learn and earn, and with that success, you have a chance to return, do it with an open heart, do it with agape, and do it in the following sense that my wife taught me, which is, I was working on Wall Street and we were building up this firm and we had 100 employees and $10 billion of assets under management and everything was going well. And she finally finished her residency. And when she finished her residency, I said to her, Sun-Mi, this is great. New York City, you're done with your residency. By the way, I'm getting on a plane and flying back to San Francisco. So here's the deal. Tonight, you do not go to Bellevue. Are we clear on this? You're now an attending. I want you to send a resident. I want you to do that just as a matter of protocol, but also because I'm a little bit worried because Bellevue's dangerous. So if you change your mind, call me and I'll send a car. Strict instructions, are we clear on this? Yes, sir. So I fly to California the next morning, get up, and I call Sun-Mi and I say, Sun-Mi, I want to know, what did you do last night? Did you go to Bellevue? Yeah, I went to Bellevue. I said, what? I told you not to go to Bellevue. Why? She says, well, look, I wasn't planning to go, but it was a VIP. Oh, I said, New York City, I thought, CEO of one of the owners of one of the baseball teams, and one of our friends. No, she said, I have no idea what the person's name is, but she was a grandmother, and I'm sure she was very important to her children and to her grandchildren. VIP, I'm going to take care of you. If you become a doctor, take care of patients. With that, we made a decision to take 10% of our firm's profits and invest it in healthcare. Infectious disease in third world countries focused on kids, Cambodia, and somehow magically through Soon Mi, I ended up meeting another Rhodes Scholar, a man by the name of Bill Clinton. Now, Bill was somebody that I knew because I was Bill Bradley's chief of staff, and when he won the election, he offered me a position in on his team, and I said no. And so I didn't go with George Stephanopoulos and Gene Sperling. I said no, and the reason I said no was something about the moral compass of a weather vane. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a tough one. It was a job I wanted, but a job I didn't take. But I re-met him a decade later in philanthropy through the Clinton Health Initiative, and I saw something that was remarkable. The light of God burns inside of everybody, and it burns deeply inside of him. At Rwanda, he looked at the disaster that was there. When asked by a reporter, how does it feel, Mr. President, knowing that this happened under your administration? The old Bill Clinton that I knew would have shuffled and said, it wasn't my fault, it wasn't my administration. And he looked and he said, you know, it wasn't my administration, it was me, it was my failing. And he took responsibility for that. And he came with our family and went to Cambodia, and he sponsored with the Clinton Health Initiative a program to take on all of the AIDS care for all of the children of Cambodia. AIDS incidence now in Cambodia is that of the United States. Children are living. If you ask Bill Clinton what he's doing today and why he does it, in his book Giving, he makes reference to the work he did with my brother Basil and the child's picture who's now alive, Basil. So these are the messages of a very simple set of stories where people, if you look at them, many of them are either in this room or in the case of Don Gogel, they wish they were in this room but couldn't make it here. People who've touched my life and other people's lives and kept me on a path to do something that I want to encourage you all to do as well. And for that, I think I will end with some poetry. And first, Martin Luther King, poet. If in the first instance, this is not him, but this is me just sort of thinking this through, if in the first instance we get great joy by loving learning and loving the work that we do, that's how you learn to live, and to learn to live for something. But Martin Luther King had a neater idea. He said, what if you found something to die for? He said, quote, if a man or a woman has not found something they're willing to die for, they aren't fit to live. Period, close quote. That's poetry. Robert Kennedy. Because what I'm going to ask you to do is something Robert Kennedy asked. Become a ripple of hope. If you're a doctor, find suffering and heal it. If you're a scientist, find disease and cure it. If you're a political leader, find violence and war and stop it. So what did Kennedy say? He said, do not be discouraged by those who say that there's nothing that one man or one woman can do to change the amazing array of the world's ills, violence, poverty, disease, and war itself. Few of us will have the ability to bend history, but each of us can change a small portion of events, and together those small portion of events will be written in the history of this generation. Each time a man or woman stands up for an ideal or sets out to improve the lives of others, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope, and those ripples of hope can build a current that will sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. That's what you can do. So now in tribute to my dear friend Andrew and Pamela, I will end with a call, and this is not the call you're going to do now. You still got 2 or 3 years of this learn stuff, okay? 2 or 3 years of this learn stuff, but the Rhodes Trust, now under the great leadership of our new warden, has a new mandate. I'm going to guess mathematically that you're all somewhere between age 22 and 25. This is the beginning of your Rhodes Scholarship, and we're going to devote a lot of resources to those 3 years for you. We might extend it a couple of years, right, Andrew? And then what we're going to do is, as you leave here, we're going to try to put together an effort to formalize the next 70. or 75. So that you're part of this Rhodes community in the way that those Rhodes scholars and non-Rhodes scholars touch my life and help shape my life. We would like to do that with you. And so with you, I'll leave you with the words of Alfred Lord Tennyson. And it was the poem that I read just before I walked into my viva. Ulysses. So the lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes. The deep rolls round with many voices. Come, my friends. 'Tis not too late to seek a new world. Push off, and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset in the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that we will touch the happy isles. It may be that we see the great Achilles, whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now, that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic heart, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, and not to yield. Thank you very much.